industry, and now I'm kind of new to the informatics field. And mostly my experience in the past 6 months has been more on the academic side. But do you guys think there are just inherent barriers to kind of just normal everyday programmers participating in some of these projects? Maybe not so much with OpenEMR, but and I guess mainly what I'm asking is, like, if you look at a lot of the things that drive developers now, at least kind of my cohort, is access to data. Like, if you look at the bulk of things, like O'Reilly's just put out like 5, how to mine Twitter, how to mine Facebook type of, but like healthcare, you can't really, there's no open data set, there's no open APIs that people can access, so there's no incentive. And then, like, if you were to set something up like Connect, there's a difference between setting up Rails and setting up Connect. Sure. So, is there, one, do you think there's that inherent barrier, and then 2, do you have like any answers to?
So are you talking about barriers in terms of access to the data?
For developers, to kind of jump in.
In our project, we welcome new developers. We love it when they come on board and start helping out. It just means it helps divide the workload into smaller pieces for the rest of us. And there's a learning curve to it, and I think a lot of new developers coming into the project, their biggest problem is usually confidence and ego, where they really haven't figured out how to do it yet. But we are very, very welcoming and try to help new developers be successful in our project.
Just get through the first world review.
Well, we have a pretty vicious code reviewer, and his idea of being soft is not exactly what I would call soft.
I mean, my impression is the better organized the open source community is in terms of commitment circles and maturity in that level, the easier it is for new developers to become involved. For example, with the maturity of the Linux community, I mean, they spend a lot of effort to encourage people to join, but they have very well-defined processes for going from beginner to guru, right? And the hardest communities to join are these kind of ad hoc, everybody's, let's get on a web conference once in a while and stuff like that, where the roles are undefined, because then you get, it's the hero syndrome, right? There's no, unless you're a hero, you can't contribute. And that's, so I see that the role of learning how to better organize these open source communities to make that governance more democratic. I mean, Linux is mission critical, so it's critical that the final committers, have that level of quality. But the fact is a beginning programmer can do some work, and it can go up through the commitment circles and eventually get implemented.
It's ironic you brought up O'Reilly and their program for publishing these kinds of documents, or books rather, and resources for programmers. This morning, Andy Orem from O'Reilly reached out to me specifically about collaborating on publishing some new materials on the Connect and the interfaces and all of that kind of stuff. So I told him I was at the conference and I had to leave tomorrow, and we'd have to talk next week. So we'll map out a strategy for what needs to be published as we work to evolve this Cal layer that we will release, what we call the common abstraction layer, for taking data and putting it out, expressing it in standard model-based form. As we move that forward and make sure it's compliant with what PCAST wants to achieve, hopes to achieve, then there will be a set of published APIs with respect to that, and I suspect that will become a default open data standard for data coming out of EMRs. Now, will it? I don't know, but it will be a likely candidate that may move in that direction. And it's a layer of abstraction that allows people to do all kinds of creative things back here in the EMR But when they need to create stuff for health information exchange, it allows you to plug into that architecture, and you don't have to worry about becoming a semantic SOA expert in order to participate in those kinds of services. So our goal is to make sure that we get these things. We'll work with O'Reilly, or we'll publish it through some kind of media form. And then the other thing is, in the new foundation that we've set up, we are a public charity, but we also have educational, technical, scientific, and research and literary publishing exempt purposes defined for it as well. So we have a vision of setting up some kind of informatics institute that we can collaborate with educational institutions to create mentoring programs to help make it easier for folks to come out of community college and take some additional, maybe an internship or what have you, over a summer of code kind of thing, where they can gain the expertise in some of these areas that are a lot more focused, if you will, in terms of semantic SOA or what have you.
I think I'm going to reserve the right for the last question, if that's okay. My colleague CIOs would be aghast if I didn't ask this question, because it's a very hot topic in our state, it continues to be one, and I've talked to you about it before. And that is that in our state, ONC has funded a statewide health information exchange. In our state, it's called SCIEX, and it is a vended solution supplied associated with that. And of course, it has, I think it has an NHIN. One of the first things they put in place is I believe one of the first national connections to NHIN through that system. However, it is not particularly popular amongst the CIOs at our local hospitals, particularly ones in my organization, HSSC, being quite parochial, being South Carolinian. They want to do their own thing. Several of them have talked about having their own HIEs. There's one in place down in Charleston called I don't remember what it's called, but and they would like to connect to the NHIN on their own with their own NHIN adapter associated with that. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, the former Health and Human Services Secretary for the state, Emma Faulkner, dictated and has tried to legislate that South Carolinian hospitals must use SCIEX, our local state-sponsored HIE, or else they won't receive Medicare and Medicaid money. What's your response to that? And is it possible for there to be I mean, the local guys would like to say, okay, we would like to connect up to NHIN using our own systems. HHS is putting in place legislation to stop them doing that. Are you seeing this elsewhere in the country, these types of conflicts?
So we had 54 proposals from all of the states and territories for state HIE grants. And I probably reviewed more of those proposals than any of the other reviewers at HHS at the time that we were looking at those. And what we saw was an interesting pattern. Some states designated their SDE, their state designated entity, as the only point of contact for everybody in that state with the NHIN. Other states saw the SDE as having a role similar to ONC, so they were effectively the state level coordinator for health HIT, and it was a virtual organization. And so they had multiple RIOs, and some of those could connect directly to the NHIN, and they could connect amongst themselves, but they weren't dictating the way you're talking there. And then others were just really diffuse in terms of, and so we saw this level of just people just beginning to think about it to very well structured proposals, and so they were racked and stacked, and we did, I think, 3 sets of awards based on that. So in order to address that problem, it's not really an ONC national policy level issue, it's a state level issue, because we delegated that down to the states to determine how they wanted to do that. And so that's politics, and all politics are local, so, and they're usually bloody. Bloody battles. So if people in the state feel strongly about it, you're going to have to change the state's policy on it. That's the only thing I can advise you on it. There's nothing technically to prevent you from doing what you want to do. It's just the way it's structured.
I think the legislation got as far as the floor of the House, and then special interests associated, lobbyists associated with the hospitals stopped it. So it's not law in South Carolina, but so we're in the middle of that battle right now.
Well, if it's not law, and there's, you go have somebody look at the policy and figure out whether it truly is enforceable or not, and if it's not, then do what you need to do.
I'll speak as a Georgia citizen with absolutely none of my other hats on. And so Georgia's one of the states where how do you say, there's HIEs blooming all over the place, whether they're enterprise HIEs or regional HIEs or whatever. And part of that is, instead of fighting it, the decision at the state level was to actually encourage it. Because what the state is saying, well, our responsibility at the state is not to go and help people who can help themselves, like the rich urban areas, but to go and help the areas where there's no hospital who is serving this underserved area with little population and lots of woods and lots of bad health statistics. So the state is focusing and saying, okay, bloom, all these, make sure your patients and physicians and all of that and nursing homes are served in your area. And then we'll take the responsibility of taking our money and doing what's left over. And that includes then hooking up all those HIEs. So in a sense, the Georgia Health Information Exchange is kind of like a mini NHIN. And that's especially, but there's no restrictions. And it kind of fits that Connect model, which is real popular in Georgia right now. There's even people that are talking about micro-Connect. What can we take out of Connect, put it in a little box similar to what consumers have in their homes, and allow them to securely hook up. And so I think rather than the control, high control, it's the recognition that it has to be a groundswell.
I'm only, my state, I think, probably falls into the category they're just getting started in their understanding. When we went to a couple of those meetings, me and a couple of my partners in the room were all the most knowledgeable people there. And I thought that was kind of a particularly sad thing, that we were having to explain what these terms meant to the people that were on the panel.
I'd like to thank our panel very much indeed for a good discussion around open source and NHIN Connect at very, very short notice, I have to say. So thank you all very much indeed.